And the next minute, I was like, oh, Jean-Pierre parle français entre mes jambes. Hi BookTube, it's Marianne at We Last Wear Book, and today we are wrapping up the first half of February 2021. So it is the 14th of February, happy Valentine's Day to everyone, and we have 8 books to wrap up today. So not only is it the end of the second week in February, it is the end of the second week of the Black Author Readathon. So out of the 8 books that we're wrapping up today, 7 of them were Black authored and the other one I started at the end of January. So the first book I finished this month was Desperate Measures by Katie Robert. This is a BDSM dark romance based on Disney tales. So this is the first book in the Wicked Villain series, and the Wicked Villain series is basically a dark romantic twist on your classic Disney favourites. So a few content warnings for Desperate Measures. We have consensual non-consent. We have daddy kink, if that's something that you're not into. Parental abuse, and it's a sort of captor-captive dark romance. So if any of those things aren't your vibe, then I would steer clear. So this has sort of mafia vibes to it without being a mafia romance. Jasmine and Jafar have this complicated relationship where he was sort of like involved in security for Jasmine's dad's business, and it seems like they've had this kind of sexual tension going on for a while. It's been building up over time, and then Jasmine's dad gets bumped off and Jafar kind of kidnaps her, and there's this whole, I use the term romance quite loosely because the majority of the book is made up of smut, which I have no issue with. Like, I love the book, but yeah. So I listened to this on audio and it had me blushing, okay? It had me blushing. Like I said in my vlog, the male narrator for this was outstanding. Like, he had this deep, gravelly, husky voice that made me feel some type of way. And again, like I said in the vlog, he sounded at times like the hormone monster from Big Mouth, which again, that voice makes me feel some type of way, so do with that information what you will. The BDSM element of it, there's not much in the way of S&M, so there's not much with regards to the pain pleasure side of things, but very much the dom sub dynamic. Again, you've got the daddy kink there, which I thought would kind of squick me out a wee bit, but you know, I didn't actually mind it. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know if my enjoyment was amplified by the fact that I was listening to it on audio, as well, because the narrators were really good, particularly the male narrator, as I have previously boldly stated. What really sold me on this was consensual non-consent can be quite hard to get right, and I have a tendency to avoid it if I know that it's going to be in a dark romance, because a lot of the time it's not really done in the right way. But Katie Robert put a huge focus on the fact that the non-consent was consensual. Between the characters and their monologues, the context surrounding the scenes, it really sort of makes it aware without explicitly telling you that this is consensual. And also from a BDSM standpoint, there is a lot of focus on aftercare, consent, discussing limits, stuff like that. Obviously that's my opinion, other people might disagree, but I feel like it was done really, really well. The book was filthy. but you know, I really wasn't mad about it. I was totally here for it and I loved it. So, moving on to the books that I had been reading in the first 2 weeks of the Black Author Readathon. So, the next book is Grading Curves by Naima Simone. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. This is an age gap slash taboo romance slash teacher student slash absolutely steamy romance. And we have Nikki and Dean. Dean is a tattooist and Nikki is a lecturer at a college. Nikki has moved to a new place. She is starting a new job at a new school and decides on a whim that she's going to go and get a tattoo done, do something kind of wild and out of her comfort zone. And she meets Dean, who is the tattooist, and they have kind of like instant chemistry between them. The tattoo is signed off with a happy ending, which I was here for. And she goes off and she goes to work the next day, and Dean is there as a student in her class. And from there goes the forbidden kind of relationship situation. I really wish that this had been like a full-length novel, because I would love to have seen where the relationship went from the point where Grading Curves ended. But I was so impressed by the character development that happened over a fairly short book, because Nikki reaches a point where she's able to stand up for herself and put people in their place, and people that have wronged her in the past come to terms with it and deal with it, which was great to see. We'll love it. Okay, so there's going to be some background noise because the kids are in the process of rage quitting Fortnite in the next room, so that's fantastic. The next book I read was Equivalent Exchange by Christina C. Jones. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. This one was a contemporary workplace romance. These characters were in their mid to late 30s, which I appreciated because it's quite nice to see something closer to your age bracket. And the story centres around the characters of Keris and Lakin. Keris is a graphic designer. She has just been forced out of a job and she has split up with her ex and goes into this bar wanting to drown her sorrows, etc. And she meets Lakin, who owns the bar and a kind of mini brewery, nano brewery. I'm not sure what the word for it is. I think it's nano brewery. And the two of them kind of hit it off. They have some good chemistry from the beginning. And both of them have past trauma that they need to work through. Some content warnings for Equivalent Exchange. There is miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, domestic abuse, sexual assault, death of a sibling, addiction and suicide. So there's quite a few trigger warnings, but it is a worthwhile read. I absolutely adored this book. So Lakin ends up taking Keris on as a graphic designer to help with the marketing and labelling and everything like that of his brand, his website, all of that sort of thing that comes with graphic design. And the two of them form a relationship. And what I really loved about this, two characters had their own past issues that they were dealing with, and it is one of the very few times that I see trauma dealt with in a healthy way, particularly in a romance. Usually, like, if there's any kind of past trauma involved, there's either not much communication about what happens, or they leave it until there's a kind of breaking point before they discuss the trauma, or they end up just kind of falling into each other physically to ignore the trauma. But in Equivalent Exchange, the two characters are communicating with one another. One of them is in therapy to discuss their issues. It is really well done. It is a very healthy exploration on dealing with past trauma. And another thing that I loved is Lakin's ex-wife ends up coming into the story, and instantly I went, oh no, please don't tell me that we're going to have some ex-wife drama. But no, there is no other woman drama happening. It is dealt with maturely and so lovely, and I adored it. I was genuinely invested in this relationship and watching how it unfolded and how the two characters sort of became more trusting and safe with each other, and I just I have nothing to complain about this book. Even if I were to be really super duper nitpicky, there is absolutely nothing about this book that I can criticise whatsoever. I'm just disappointed that I never came across it sooner. The intimate scenes were really well written, it was really spicy, but I absolutely despised Keris's ex-boyfriend Walter. He is the epitome of toxic masculinity. The gaslighting, the constant kind of trying to communicate with her, just everything. I hated him. He had absolutely no redeeming qualities at any point throughout this book, and I'm so glad that the author didn't try to give him a redemption arc, because he did not deserve it. He was literally the worst. So yeah, I really, really, really loved it, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. The next book I read was Forbidden by Beverly Jenkins. This is a historical romance. A few content warnings for racism, colorism, and attempted sexual assault. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars to. I had a kind of weird relationship with this book. So, the main character, Eddie, is wanting to start a new life for herself, to open up her own restaurant slash diner in California. But while she is trying to get to California, there are a few bumps in the road and she ends up in a desert. And Ryan, the hero, comes to her aid. He finds her, rescues her, takes him back to his home and nurses her back to health. And that's great. So Ryan is biracial. His mum was a black slave and his dad was a white slave owner, and he is very light skinned to the point where he is able to pass as a white man, and he has built up his fortune and his place in politics due to the fact that he is white passing and is viewed as a white man. The relationship with Eddie is really complicated because at that point in time you couldn't have interracial couples. He is also engaged to someone. Unfortunately, it's an engagement that he doesn't want to be part of, but he's engaged anyway to a white woman. And when he meets Eddie and Eddie meets him, the two of them have a little bit of chemistry that starts building up to something a wee bit more. And then he has to make the decision between whether he wants to stick to passing as white or whether to reveal the fact that he is biracial. My issue with the book is I don't really feel like I was fully sold in the relationship, personally. It sort of went like, you could tell that the two of them were attracted to each other, but I wasn't feeling love from either of the two of them. That kind of was just a wee bit missing for me. What I did love about the book was the fact that it focused quite a lot on the history of America at that time with regards to colorism and the two different sides of the Republican Party and how they kind of pushed against each other. One side was more progressive whereas the other one wasn't, which I didn't know, because when I think of kind of Republican parties nowadays, that I don't typically see the progressive side of it. But yeah, like, it wasn't that I didn't like the book, it was just I just really didn't feel the romance there. I don't know if it was just the kind of mood that I was in at the time when I was reading it, because I'm pretty sure that was when I was having the pretty intense period of migraines. So maybe I need to go back and reread it again, I don't know. But yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it. I loved that she focused on the love and the relationships within the community and the friendships within the community. Instead of focusing on the trauma, it focused on the joy that people can find outside of that trauma. And so the next book I read was Who He Is by Shonora Williams. This one is a rockstar romance, which normally I don't have a tendency to gravitate towards, but I read it and I'm quite glad I did. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars as well. This is based around the characters of Eliza and Gage, who are in their early 20s. Gage is part of this band called Fire 9. This is the first book in the Fire 9 series. And Eliza's dad manages the band. So she goes on tour with them while she's got a break before she starts going to college. So Eliza has had a bit of a crush on Gage for a long time, since they were at high school, and she kind of keeps herself to herself. She would rather paint and do things kind of quiet and on her own. She has a history of parental abuse with her mother, so she has PTSD. It isn't mentioned that often, but she does have panic attacks and has a tendency to avoid the subject altogether. Gage is your stereotypical rock star kind of type, like he's more concerned about drinking and girls and music than anything else. But there is chemistry there between Eliza and Gage that the two of them are kind of trying to avoid. He doesn't want the emotional side of things, and she just doesn't want anything in general. Like, she likes him, but she doesn't want to start a relationship because she's worried that she's gonna start feeling emotions that they're trying to avoid. And then she doesn't want to get into anything serious because she's going to be coming off the tour and going to college to follow her dreams. So after a lot of back and forth banter and trying to make each other jealous by bringing other girls around and being around other guys, the two of them eventually decide, right, okay, we'll have this fling, no strings attached, and then when the tour's over, we're done, we can go our separate ways, just a bit of fun, and then move on. But the two of them begin to develop feelings for each other, which introduces complications. There's conflict within the band. There's lots of stuff happening. Both of them have things in their past that they don't want to share, so they don't really communicate that well to begin with until it gets to a certain point. He has had stuff happen in his life, she has had stuff happen in her life, and they have to work through that together. And then the ending came. Everything escalated to a place that I did not see it escalating to, and it didn't end how I thought it was going to end. Thankfully, there was a page after the last page of the story, which notified me that the next book in the series addresses the relationship between Eliza and Gage and where they go from there, because I was crying at the end. I didn't know what was happening. I was desperate for it to end how I wanted it to end. So once I've finished the list of books that I have in my TBR, I will be going back to read the next book in the series, which is Who We Are, which will hopefully give me the insight as to what happens next, because that left me in turmoil. It was quite spicy. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. So now we come across the book that changed my view on mafia romances. So one minute I was like, I really hate mafia romances. And the next minute I was like, oh, Jean-Pierre parle français entre méchants. The book was Rhapsody by Kenya Wright. This is the first book in the Violinist and the Butcher duology. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that word, duology. We're going with duology, okay? Right. So I give this one 5 out of 5 stars because I absolutely loved it. You have the main character, Eden, who is a struggling violinist. The symphony that she played for has just shut down and she has no job. Her Aunt Selena owns a brothel and she goes to work in her aunt's brothel to play violin for the clientele. And then this mysterious French stranger shows up and oh, he is delicious. The stranger is Jean-Pierre, who works for the French mafia. And normally I don't vibe with mafia romances, but oh my lord, I was here for the whole story. So, Eden just wants to play violin. She doesn't want to be a sex worker, a point that I am going to come back to when I finish discussing the plot. She doesn't want to be a sex worker, but he offers her a proposal, which she's intrigued by because they have instant chemistry. She's totally picking up what he's putting down. The sexual tension is wild. I was seduced. She goes along with this thing and she gives him the girlfriend experience while she's playing violin. Like, he is obsessed with her violin. And when I say violin, I don't mean it euphemistically, I mean her literal violin. She plays it, he is aroused. It's made me want to learn violin. That's how into this story I was. So anyway, she gives him this girlfriend experience and the two of them start to develop feelings for each other. It is really spicy. Word of warning, if you're planning on reading it and you have children running around, or you're reading it in work, or you're reading it on the bus, there are erotic illustrations in it, just in case someone is looking over your shoulder while you're reading it. The chemistry between the characters was amazing. I was 100% invested in the relationship. Even the kind of shady aspects of the pursuit of Eden I can waive, because Jean-Pierre. I kind of wish that once she'd been told the full information about the past 3 years that she would have had a bit more of a reaction. But she was kind of just like, yeah, let's bang. Can you imagine being loved by someone so much that they would take on the Russian mafia for you? Because I have not been loved that much. But yeah, Kenya Wright totally flipped the script on mafia romances for me. I can't wait to read the next book in the duology, where hopefully we will find out there's a few characters at the end you're kind of unsure of their whereabouts and what's happening with them. So really looking forward to the next book to see what happens next and have some more of Jean-Pierre and Eden's action happening. Yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. I was here for it. I am converted. And I am really sorry for ever doubting any mafia recommendations I have received. The second last book I read in the first half of the month was 2 Weeks Notice by Whitney G, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. This centres around the characters of Tara and Preston. Tara starts a new job after being caught doing something that she shouldn't have been doing, with Preston Parker as her boss. She works as his executive assistant. He is a hotel owner. He is a hotel chain owner, and he is very rich and very powerful, and he is literally the worst boss in the world. He makes her life hell. She has no social life whatsoever, but again, you feel the chemistry. Basically, he keeps losing all these executive assistants because he treats them like shit, overworks them, and they just leave. But Tara's like, no, I'm going to prove you all wrong. I'm going to try and stick around. But then she's had enough. She writes a 2-week notice letter and he gives it back to her and says, I'm sorry, you can't quit. There are things that you missed in your contract. There was a very sneaky way that he kind of slipped in some clauses in her contract that she didn't notice, and she now can't leave unless he fires her. So she tries everything in her power to be sacked from this job, and he's just like, no, it's not happening. I'm not letting you go. What I did not like was we had a massive time jump. I don't mind if we have a time jump where there's a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months, but we had a 2-year time jump with very little context for what happened in those 2 years. The only thing I can ascertain from the context of the book is he was still the worst boss ever during this period of time and she wanted to leave. Because I could understand if she had no money and then you're kind of stuck in a job you hate. She had the means to have money there to tide her over until she gets a new job. Even though she legally can't quit, she could just stop turning up to work. But then there's the introduction of a really quite a sweet storyline, which made me cry a little bit in parts. His niece Violet is introduced, and then I finally begin to warm up to him as a character, because prior to this he had no redeeming qualities. Normally in your alpha male kind of boss slash CEO situation, they have at least a few redeeming factors, but he had no redeeming factors whatsoever. But then again, you find out towards the end they did have redeeming factors. It's just you knew nothing about them, and technically neither did Tara. I liked the storyline with the niece. I enjoyed the sex scenes. I just didn't enjoy the time jumps, and I just was not feeling the love. I felt the lust. I just didn't feel the love. I was hoping for more of a love situation where my head was at that time. So maybe if I reread it another time when I'm kind of more looking for something lusty, I'll pick it up again and reassess my opinions. And the last book I read in the first half of the month was In Tandem by Christina C. Jones. I finished this today after reading it non-stop, and 5 stars. I adored this. It is a friends to lovers sports romance. Normally sports romance isn't something I gravitate towards either, but this was cyclists, and normally you don't get books about cyclists that often, so I was like, right, okay, right, let me see what's happening here. I loved every element to this story so much. We have Brittany and we have Raphael. So Raphael is a world famous cyclist who is jet setting all over the world doing bike races and all that sort of thing, and Brittany she owns a bike shop. She also loves cycling. She has vitiligo, which has made her really self-conscious about her appearance, and she doesn't really leave the area that she lives in because she is so self-conscious about it. So Raphael and Brittany are besties, like real besties. They tell each other they love each other, but they haven't seen each other for a long time because Raphael has been away travelling, and he shows up and surprises her, and it's just a lovely reunion. So a little bit of backstory about Raphael. He has had a really bad bike accident and he had a really long recovery. He had a traumatic brain injury, he had loads of damage to his body physically, and he has decided that he just wants out of the cycling life. He wants to move back to where they grew up and live in the same place as Brittany, his bestie. So he comes back and surprises her. They reunite. She decides, right, it's time to get out of my comfort zone. I want to do this thing. Raphael, I feel safe with you, so we're going to go on a 100-mile cycle journey to this place that I want to go to, and we're going to do it together. And they go and they do that together, and the relationship becomes closer as time goes by. I mean, like, you can tell straight away when she's like thinking about him and talking about him that she is thinking of him as more than a friend, and vice versa. So it was inevitable it was going to happen, but it was sweet, it was cute, it was a little bit spicy. I just adored this. Like, both of them have their ups and downs and things that they need to overcome, and the one thing for me that really stood out was Brittany started at the start of the book. Brittany had such big issues with her vitiligo. She was so hung up on it, and she thought that it detracted from the way that she looked. She thought other people were judging her for it. She thought other people were staring at her because of it. And then at the end of the book, she has this like epiphany where she comes to realise that the only person that sees and hates her vitiligo is herself, and that she is beautiful, and that other people think she's beautiful and other people love her. And honestly, at that point I cried, and seeing that self-acceptance and that growth was just beautiful. And again, Raphael had things in his past to do with his cycling career that he had to come to terms with, and issues with his parents. But honestly, seeing that growth and that acceptance of Brittany's perception of herself versus other people's perceptions of her was just... it was lovely, it was wholesome, I loved it. If you're looking for a really good friends to lovers romance, this was just perfect. Like, you could see there really was a genuine, solid friendship there. and they knew each other and they trusted each other implicitly, and they were just perfect. I loved this book. I have no complaints about this book. I had nothing I can nitpick at about this book. Christina C. Jones has truly threw me this month. So those are the 8 books that I finished in the first half of February. I am going to sign this off by saying that Christina C. Jones gave me 2 5-star books that I couldn't even nitpick at. So I definitely think that I am going to be consuming a hell of a lot more of Christina C. Jones books, because those 2 were amazing. They didn't shy away from dealing with past traumas. They didn't shy away from coming to terms with things that have happened in your life, things that are your life, things that are a part of you. I'm genuinely in love. So thus far, February is shaping up to be an amazing reading month, and long may it continue. So in my next wrap up, I will have the other books that I'm currently working through for the Black Author Readathon, along with hopefully the follow-up books to Who He Is and Rhapsody, because I am absolutely gagging to get to the next book. So yeah, can't wait. I'm hoping that you're enjoying your Tuesday, because currently I'm probably not enjoying mine while you're watching this. So stay safe, happy reading, and I'll speak to you guys later. Bye!